Hey, season 3 of Invincible is amazing.
Oh, this is just too good.
With new voice actors, bigger action, and even crazier moments. But it also brings the most changes a season has ever had. Characters like Oliver and Cecil have very different portrayals compared to their comic counterparts. New characters were added just to add more fuel to the fire, and at this point in the comic, William still thinks he's straight. These changes and so many more completely reshaped the story in ways the comic never did. But some also hurt the story as well. And today we're finally breaking down how they do it and why. So like always, drop a like, subscribe, and let's get into every difference across the characters, timelines, and more for season 3 of Invincible. Episode 1. Now this one pulls from issues 42, 45 to 49, and 57. And episode 1 starts with a buff Mark training with that Cyclops using the environment for workouts. None of this happened in the comic, but this is a great change because it shows his growth. They literally tell us how much stronger and faster he's gotten since we last saw him, and it gets the audience hyped.
Gets the people going.
In the comic though, all we hear is that Cecil says he can lift 4 tons. We also find out that the giant Cyclops is actually an 8-year-old kid who was turned into the monster, and the government is trying to return him back to normal. And it's the same in the comic, but we found this all out from Mark when he was telling Wolfman after them two captured the Cyclops when he was trying to escape from the government facility. Mark also says he was dragged into another dimension before being mutated, so the comic kind of gives it a bit more context. Rex shows up to get maintenance on his new arm, and in the comic he loves this thing, while in the show he complains about it barely working.
I'm trying to give you the finger right now, and I can't.
Oh man, that's your favorite finger.
Then they learn someone's trying to steal the Declaration of Independence, and they both leave. But in the show, some mystery guy spies on them and leaks the location, which didn't happen in the comic. They get there and they come across Dropkick and Fightmaster, who looks and acts the exact same as the comic. Really, this whole scene is one-to-one for the most part. And also, Multi-Paul comes in, beats up Rex, and gets taken to jail in both mediums. It then cuts to an older Oliver during a tutoring session, and I really liked his portrayal in the show, but we'll get to that later. They completely skipped the toddler phase and things like that, where in the comic it showed that development. Mark comes home and they throw the baseball just like how Mark and his dad used to do, but they do it after the Declaration of Independence was taken. While here, it wasn't taken until 4 issues later. He also got his powers before Mark dropped out of college for good, before he showed Alan Nolan's comics and was taken to prison, and before Anissa showed up for the first time. While here, he gets them after all that happened. Oliver speaks way more proper in the comic, almost robotic, but this is here to show how much he's matured. Since the last time we saw him in the comic, he was just a toddler. He could barely talk. Shrinking Ray comes back in the show, which is a huge change because he's gone, like gone in the comic. She also has something going on with Rex now, which I'm not mad at, to be honest. Cecil and Donald are tracking weird geological events that they can't explain since Doc Seismic is still in jail. And all of this is new, because in the comic, him taking over just happens pretty fast and off screen. Cecil also learns about Oliver's powers pretty early on, and it's most likely from the cameras in Mark's house. In the comic, he finds out about this after seeing Oliver help fight Lava Man and his boyfriend, which we don't get to see until episode 3 in the show. Mark, William, and Rick go to the bowling alley in both mediums, but here Rick and William still think that they're straight. Also, Mark talks about future Eve with them in the show. Debbie tries to cover up Oliver's skin so he can go to the zoo, which this doesn't happen in the comic. Cecil talks to Oliver directly in the show once he gets there, which does not happen here. And he also seems to trust Oliver more here, and it's probably because of that conversation. But in both versions, Debbie is against him helping Oliver become a hero. Then Mark pulls up to Eve's place to ask her out and fumbles it by bringing up her future self. In the comic, this moment happens in his dorm room when she tried to ask him out, but he brought it up and she thought he only liked her out of pity. So by the time Doc Seismic starts making his move, instead of him going to Eve's house like in the show, he pulls up whenever Eve is helping out this random village. And there's already tension between them two because this moment already happened in the comic. And when the Great Doctor attacks, she reluctantly agrees, while in the show, he creates that tension. and Adam Eve is roaring to go because she's so mad at Mark that she just wants to take it out on anything. Doc Seismic breaks out and he is way cooler in the show, like he's more calm, collected, and everything is just going according to his plan. While in the comic, he was not expecting to get this far. The way Cecil and Mark learn about Seismic plan is the same, but Oliver tries to help here, which doesn't happen in the comic. He's nowhere to be seen actually. And then all of the heroes in the world, or at least that are in Cecil's disposal, are all getting captured. But the underground creatures are mostly red now, while in the comic they were like green and gray and other colors like that. Wolfman, Zachariah, Savage Dragon, Brett, everyone with spin-off comics shows up with a bigger role in the fight, but here they were nowhere to be seen. And then Eve gets taken out by Seismic instead of a monster like in the comic, which just makes it more personal for Mark. Mark also gets poisoned in the show, while here he loses just straight up from fatigue. But they all get saved by Darkwing and the robot zombies. And in the show, Mark is instantly pissed, while here he was just confused. Like, why are they all here and why is he here? It wasn't until after Doc Seismic was caught that he found out that Cecil was behind it all. He then listens to Cecil's plea to leave and thinks it over before confronting him. While in the show, he instantly knew and acts on pure emotion, even shutting Eve out. Rex is also naked. Mark gets to HQ and confronts Cecil about it. Cecil believes that people can change. He even calls out Mark's double standards for killing Angstrom. And honestly, I get where they're both coming from. If someone I loved was reanimated, I would get mad too. But Cecil also has a point, you know, people can change. They just have to want it for themselves. In the comic, their argument just feels more balanced. You know what I mean? You really do understand both sides. But in the show, Mark's reaction leans a little more toward a tantrum than I'd want it to be. A justified one, yeah, but still a tantrum. But it ends with both versions of Cecil leading Mark to the White Room just in case he needs protection. And lastly, we see Nolan and Alan again. It shows that the Viltrumites actually cannot kill this dude, and them bonding. Here though, Alan was captured by Anissa right when these two stole the Declaration of Independence, which, you know, happened in season 2 for us. And also the Viltrumites learning that they can't kill Alan happened after Mark and Cecil's fallout, but here they decided to put that in the middle of their argument. So you can really see the differences in timeline already. There's a bunch of small changes and big ones, and things like that make me really respect the show a lot more. It takes a lot of hard work to make certain specific changes, all to actually help somebody shine in a way that they didn't in the comic, or just for better storytelling since they only have 8 episodes a season to work with. So yeah, I definitely get what people are saying about the animation and all the other problems the show has, but the creators still deserve credit where it's due, you know? But okay, let's move on. Now this is a cool episode, man. And it starts with young Cecil. Adapting parts from issues 50 and 51, it kicks off with young Cecil stopping the Order of the Freeing Fist. In the comics, there are a couple, but in the show, it leaves that a little vague. They built this gas bomb to wipe out the entire city over some twisted beliefs that they have. But before they set it off, Cecil walks in, tells everyone to leave, calls HQ with a coded message, and sacrifices himself to stop it. This is all new. In the comic, he's not that heroic, and we only see when they're just about to set off the bomb. He's chained up to the bomb in the comic. The bomb explodes, and Britt saves him just in time. But here, Britt's not even around. So yeah, they clearly did this to make Cecil more heroic and mirror Mark's own heroism. He wakes up at the medical wing in HQ in both versions, but Britt is on his side in the comic, whereas here it's the current GDA head. Then we jump to a disaster scene. The GDA head is barely hanging on, and it looks like they're cooked, until the Order jumps in and saves him. Cecil is pissed because they're criminals, and he kills them, which is the same in the comic, and it starts planting the seed that maybe things aren't so black and white, mirroring Mark's heroism, and is hinting at how gray the world really is. A lesson that Mark himself won't fully learn until the end of this season, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, he shoots them both and he goes to jail. But here is a really cool change. The show actually shows his time in prison, and he ends up taking it over, making it safer somehow. And it turns out that this was his rehab. The head saw how valuable he was and decided to quote-unquote fix it, further enforcing that lesson he was trying to teach to Cecil. And now we know that his belief in people can change for the better comes from him experiencing that sort of thing firsthand. I could talk about Cecil all day, way, but hey, I'm just glad they made this change. The head says the same line that sticks with Cecil for years in the comic and the show, and then we go forward in time with Cecil and Mark's fight, and it's brutal in both versions. In the comic, Cecil has way more of an evil vibe going on, like you can tell he's the bad guy. In the comic, Mark is talking about blowing the whistle on the whole thing, but Cecil says, how would they ever find out what we do? You underestimate my reach. Like he has something to hide. Throughout this entire altercation with Mark, Cecil is calm, but he's not menacing. You see where he's coming from. While here, Cecil's calling him a threat. You are my enemy now. So they kind of flip the script a little bit for the show. Mark gets closer and Cecil panics a bit in the comic, but stays imposed in the show. Traps Mark the same way in both and uses a high-frequency sound device. In the comic, he says it was implanted after Nolan tried to take over, while in the show, he doesn't explain when he put it in his body, but he just says that it's from that giant lobster in Atlantis. That's where they got the sound from. Mark couldn't take it anymore, so he escapes. Cecil hits it again, he crashes on a car in the comic, while in the show it was on the pavement. Another difference is you can tell that there's still love between these two, while here they do not like each other anymore, and there is no ounce of respect between them at all. Mark drags himself to the Guardians HQ where robots just casually playing Mario Galaxy. What the heck? It's pretty cool though. And then dude just crashes in both mediums, saying Cecil wants to kill him, but I gotta be honest with you, the show is good, but the comic just felt more intense. Because of the colors they used created a sense of urgency, and everyone is seeing how Cecil is without a doubt the bad guy in the comic. While here, they're not so sure. They agree what Cecil did was wrong, but on the other hand, they understand why he did it, and they also see how truly scary Mark is. Very reminiscent to his father. They both threaten each other and part ways. Mark heads home and his family and Eve are there. In the comic, the whole conversation happens off panel, while in the show, Mark explains everything out loud and Oliver immediately says, "You should have killed him." In the comic, he didn't speak like this yet. They all tell him to chill and Mark and Eve head outside and they kiss and start dating right then in the comic. While in the show, it's more drawn out. We then cut to the Guardians HQ and Robot, Shrinking Ray, Monster Girl, Bulletproof, and Rex all quit. And the show talks about what made them come to these conclusions. In the comic though, they don't show this. Mark just predicts that this is what's gonna happen. Black Samson though stays behind, acting as a man on the inside, while here he fully just sides with Cecil. But while leaving, Robot says something that kind of alludes to a future event that happens with him in the comic, but hey, that's all I'll say about it, no spoilers. Mark tells William and Rick about Sinclair working for Cecil, and that's new for the show. And of course, they're pissed. Debbie goes on a date with Paul, who looks completely different here. And in the comic, we only get a glimpse of them talking, while in the show, it dives into how hard it is for her to date someone she can't really be honest with. Darkwing joins the Guardians, and Immortal welcomes him in both versions. But in the show, it's more based off of nostalgia more than anything. And finally, we circle back to Cecil and Donald, with my boy Donald saying putting Darkwing on the team was kind of risky, you know what I mean? He did kill people. And then he has a flashback to when he first took over the GDA and met Nolan. During that flashback, Donald is there, while in the comic, he's nowhere to be seen. But the rest is basically one-to-one. And we wrap up with Mark and Eve finally coming together and kissing. And hey, they got a great relationship, man. But okay, that's enough of that. Let's move on to... And though the comic starts with William cosplaying as Invincible, of all people, and then Mark coming in out of nowhere calling him gay, the show starts with Magmaniac and Tether Tyrant robbing a bank. But we see them in a way that we've never seen before. We see their emotions and how they're really not bad guys. The show also shows them going straight and their experiences that led them to choose to either robbing a bank or to stay homeless. It's pretty sad. The comic only shows them going back to crime because they need some more food and they want a better quality of life. They're also in a relationship in the show while they weren't in the comic. And it shows that the Tethers are alive. Oliver shows up in regular clothes versus his own makeshift costume in the show. Street cameras catch him, and this is how Cecil finds out about his powers in the comic. Eve taking architecture classes and running into Amber is new as well. In the comic, Amber never really shows up again. But around this time in the comic, she does show up, but it's to tell Mark that her new guy, the one who tried to move in whenever Mark and her was together, is hitting her. When Mark hears this, he beats the fuck out of this dude and threatens to kill him if he hits him again. But that scene was completely cut from the show for obvious reasons. Both versions show ex-Guardians moving into the old Teen Team HQ. We then cut to Titan being warned by the Order about Multi-Paul. In the comic, Titan is fully cooperative right now. Like, he is okay with being in the Order at first. While here, he doesn't care from the start, and this frustrates Isotope. But despite that, he still agrees to break Paul out, just this once. Isotope is noticeably more scared here than in the comic, and that's because Titan is on board there. Then Mark and Oliver go get his first costume, and Mark does this in street clothes in the comic. Oliver's costume looks slightly different. It looks more streamlined here versus the comic where it has a lot of triangles and a different shade of yellow for the O. Oliver also convinces Mark that using Kid Omni-Man as his name in order to paint a better image for their dad is a smart move. While in the show, Mark convinces him that this is not a good idea. Mark also gets his new costume, and it's the same in the comic, just this time it has fingerless gloves, while here he didn't. Afterwards, they respond to a prison break. Furnace and Kursk was sent by Titan to free Multi-Paul in both versions. In the comic, their dynamic is way funnier, like Kursk speaks Russian, and Furnace just has no clue what the heck he's saying. It leads to some pretty funny moments. Oliver rushes in and gets zapped, but Mark saves him and gets angry in both mediums. Then we go to Debbie and Paul. She tells him the truth here in both mediums, but the show actually shows her doing it. Amber moves back in with her parents in both, but here she has a whole ultimatum and all of that. But in the comic, she just kind of moves in. Mark and Oliver return home and find Paul and Debbie, but Paul isn't shocked because Debbie already told him. Mark also gets called Invincible War, and everyone laughs in both mediums. Amber and Mark meet up on the roof and they talk and kiss, but someone is watching. And the comic reveals who it is right away, but the show doesn't yet. So we cut to the US missile silo, the same one that the Lizard League always breaks into. And you'd think they had more security by now, right? But no, yeah. The Mahler twins come out of nowhere and invade, got the parts they need to make these powerful weapons that attacks your nervous system and wipes out the entire new Guardians of the Globe. They take them down pretty easily in both mediums, but Invincible War comes in to help. And then everything is 1-to-1 so far. Invincible War goes to stop the missile while Kid Omni-Man stays back. But still, one thing that both of these mediums share is that he's ruthless and shows no mercy, killing the last twin even though he was begging for his life. He just saves the twin with the broken jaw for last, and he's completely intentional about killing these two in the show, versus here where he's clearly surprised by his strength. Oliver says it was an accident, but it clearly wasn't. He takes Oliver to the sky to grill him on what he's done, and in between them talking, Oliver gets pissed and tries to run away, but Mark stops him. But still though, Oliver talks about how the real responsible thing to do with their powers is to kill the bad guys. That way they don't hurt anyone else. Mark says that human life is precious. What do you mean? But in both mediums, Oliver says it's not. People kill each other all the time. The thing is though, in the comic, Oliver is a lot more logical and cold about it all. He's able to get his point across to Mark so well that even Mark kind of agrees with him towards the end of the talk. While here, he's more emotionally charged about it all, and even though he's still able to get his point across, Mark still full-heartedly believes he's wrong. Afterwards, he explained everything that happened to Eve on their first date in both mediums. But in the comic, they had their first date in some snowy place, while in the show, it was just in his backyard. Then Mark and Debbie talked to Oliver about what he did, and in the comic, he explains that he can't relate to these people. He's not from Earth, and he says that where he comes from, the greater good and the society is vastly more important than the individual. Because the comic talks a lot about these utilitarian ways, and the show is just now starting to scratch the surface of this. We're finally starting to see it in season 3. Debbie convinces Oliver what he did was wrong in the show, while in the comic he is so different. He's so much more self-aware and articulate. Like, it's kind of scary, to be honest. Mark is frustrated in both mediums, but he's particularly pissed in the comic because he hates how Oliver thinks humans are disgusting here. He's also mad at his mom for telling Paul about their identities in the first place. While at this time, they already talked about this in the show. But in the end, Mark finally catches that camera that's been spying on him. He doesn't know who it is in both mediums, but this is when the show finally reveals that it was Angstrom. Now this episode is from a few issues actually, and it starts with the two lovebirds going to the store to buy some groceries so they can cook later until a monster comes out of nowhere and suddenly attacks. This is all brand new. Then we cut to Mark at the Teen base, asking Robot to analyze the spy cameras from the last episode. And there's a few differences. Bulletproof is here, and Oliver is missing. But here he was playing Call of Duty Zombies with Monster Girl and Robot, while Robot's figuring this camera out. So in both mediums he's multitasking, but in the comic he's playing zombies. Mark says it's creepy whenever Rudy talks through his robot, but here he's a lot angrier about it and honestly low-key scary. And his new suit reflects that, like he is more scarier in the show. Robot says he cannot figure out who this is from, but he clearly has a lot of resources under his disposal. And then afterwards, Mark just thinks it's Cecil and goes to him in both versions. Cecil denies involvement, but the show does admit that they are spying on him, just not using that. And that's when it leads to the events of issue 54. Here Mark wears white and Eve wears pink. They go out on a date, but they get interrupted by Dropkick and Fightmaster. Mark instantly punches Fightmaster in the face because they came in saying grab him in the comic. While in the show they're a lot more friendlier and says he just needs his help to save the future. Still, Mark says no here, so they pretty much kidnap him, while in the comic he agrees, but only after Eve says okay let's go, and they say no, we can only take Invincible. He's taken to the future, and in the comic, future Mark looks cheerful, while in the show he looks miserable when he's taking his clothes. And the twins explain what happened. Here they're pretty vague. They say one man saved the world, became supreme ruler, then went mad centuries later, while in the show they give more detail about what he did once he started to lose his mind, like enforcing new laws, labor camps, constant wars, and all of that led to failing nations. So in retaliation, these two tried to poison him with the ink from the Declaration of Independence, but it didn't work, which is the same in both. They let themselves be captured after Mark smashes some robots in the show, and Mark is brought before Immortal. And the dialogue here is almost exactly the same. It's just that the comic hints at more future events, while the show cuts some things, and I would tell you what those are, but I can't. But here's what the show added. The twins break free and barge in during Mark's battle with Immortal, and Immortal uses this to prove that he deserves death, that he really is worth killing, he's that bad of a guy. And that's when Mark takes his head clean off, just like in the comic. Mark gets his clothes back in the show, but they don't show this part in the comic, so I'm glad they added that. And he returns to Eve, clearly shaken by it all. He's also holding the Declaration of Independence in the show, but in the comic, he doesn't. So it might still be in the future over there, I have no idea. After that though, they go on the best date ever in both versions, and it ends with them in the bed, just like in the comic. But then, that's when this narrator comes in and he's awesome, dude. I love this guy. But yeah, you know what that means.
Alan the alien, locked down, but not out.
They do a recap in both mediums, but they elaborate further here, saying just when Alan was about to give up, Nolan says this.
I think I miss my wife.
While the comic talks about how they became really good friends, and throughout waiting for Nolan's execution, they also talk about their previous fights together and how they always knew of each other but never really talked to each other. And eventually Nolan gets on board with Alan's plan. While in the show he's completely against it, he wants to die. So Alan just says he's gonna save him whether he likes it or not. Alan frees all of the prisoners including Battle Beast, but he was doing all of this on the fly, while here this was all pre-planned. Battle Beast nearly fights Alan in the show from his impatience, and eventually they do reach Nolan. Here Nolan is hesitant at first, but helps once Alan is in danger. And things just start going crazy after that. Soldiers start coming in, and Alan busts through the wall, and everyone is launched into space, and they all die except for the main characters. Then Alan and Nolan work together to take down this last Viltrumite, while Battle Beast is just drifting through space, still fighting this same Viltrumite. Anyways, this is where they finally start getting closer as friends, and it ends with Debbie almost walking in on Mark and Eve. Episode 5. Now this one's pretty good, but a lot of it is new. It primarily takes place from issues 50 and 58, and we start with Titan walking his daughter to school. This is completely new. Then we cut to Multipol's creative breakout attempt, And this is new as well, but I love this. This is wild. Like, can you imagine Naruto breaking out of somewhere like this? It'll be crazy. Then Kate's visit to Paul is also made for the show. She confronts him about his breakout and life choices. The only comic accurate part is the flashback to his dad's breakdown, when they first showed their powers when they were kids. In the show, they were older when this happened, and it also cuts a crucial piece of lore from the comic, because apparently their powers come from a 7th generation curse tied to their warlord ancestor, who completely wiped out the Chinese Empire. The dying emperor cursed him, said his 7th grandchild would have too many descendants to care for, and it would drive him mad. The show also gives us some more insight about their feelings toward their father. Paul hates his dad while Kate shows empathy towards him, which is something that wasn't explored in the comic. We cut to the Graysons having breakfast with Eve, and Mark brings up them moving in together, which is honestly really fast. Like, they haven't even been out for like a full month yet, and the comic does something similar. Like, they talk about moving in 8 issues after they got together, which still isn't very long. So now they start wondering how they're gonna make the money to get their own place. And that's when Eve goes to the prison to talk about Invincible Incorporated, which she does in the comic as well. But the show actually shows her talking to the higher up, while it doesn't in the comic. She also wears a green suit and pink glasses here. Meanwhile, Titan talks to Lou in his new HQ, and he is mad that Paul isn't out yet, and tells Titan to handle it or else. At first, Titan refuses until Louis threatens his daughter. And everything in the scene, him checking on his family, telling them to hide, going to Machine Head for advice, is all new. Mark and Eve talk about their new business, and Mark is totally on board in the show. But here he's very hesitant, and actually was starting to get pretty mad at Eve for going to the prison without telling him, and also being secretive because she was trying to keep it a surprise for him. But Mark wasn't having any of that in the comic, so he kind of forced her to tell him. Then Debbie interrupts and Oliver is missing. And this entire sequence is also new. In the comic, Oliver does not care about Earth or people, but the show paints him as a good kid with major potential, even if he believes killing is justified. But the thing is, how does he or Mark know who chooses to live or die? That's a question that's going to be brought up a lot in the coming seasons. Rex starts putting the moves on Shrieking Ray. Titan then storms the prison to break Paul out, but he's stopped by Mark in both versions. The show kind of expands their conversation. They talk more about Titan's betrayal, which they don't really do that in the comic surprisingly, and about how he's cleaned up the place since Machine Head was in charge. Titan also explains the Order, which is a global crime syndicate led by Mr. Liu, which, by the way, if I say his name wrong, I'm so sorry. But in the comic, it's this extremely powerful villain named Set who runs it. And Liu is just one of like the leaders, but I have no clue if he's coming in the show or not. And in the comic, Titan is completely fine with being in the Order. But okay, back to Liu. He shows up in person, but the scene's location changes. In the comic, he shows up at the prison mid-breakout, while in the show, this all goes down at Titan's HQ. Mr. Liu storms in Titan's building pissed, and he says time is up. While here, he says this at the prison right when Titan himself was trying to break him out. So the show started the dragon fight in Titan's tower. Hey, you see what I did there? While here, it just starts at the prison. And he kills Titan. Everything so far is completely different because in the comic, remember when he was there and then he was stopped by Invincible? That's when Titan just comes out of nowhere with its dragon form for the first time. They start their dragon fight at the prison, and he successfully breaks out Paul and just leaves. There was nothing Invincible can do, and he was there on his own. While here, they come up with a really elaborate plan to successfully kill Liu. Mark gets a call on his Invinciphone, trademark pending, and this is new since they don't even have this business until after Paul gets freed. But yeah, with that said, everything Eve does in this fight is brand new because she just wasn't there in the comic. And also, Mark gets hurt so much here too. He barely has a scratch over on the other side. Then he just fires Titan and plans to take over his territory. That is when Titan tells Isotope to choose a side, and he decides to teleport him to the Great Wall of China, pretty much starting a war between these two. Every single time they see each other, they argue, but they get set in line from the actual boss, Set. But yeah, no, here they kill Liu, and Machine Head becomes the new leader of the entire Order. Everyone is there except for Titan, who actually leaves the Order, because as y'all know, he stays in the Order in the comic. Then the episode wraps up with Mark and Eve agreeing to slow down their relationship, thank God, and Paul successfully sneaks away from the prison. And lastly, Liu gets resurrected. Now we get to one of the best episodes of the season, episode 6. And it came and went just like it did in the comic. It introduced a completely separate character from the main plot right now and turned him into a tragic powerhouse, and they get it all from issue 59. We start with Scott Duvall spending time with his sister and niece. His niece punches the f*** out of him repeatedly because he happens to have powers of his own. He's able to absorb kinetic energy from objects, explosions, and physical attacks, and uses that energy towards combat. But he has a low-level version of it, and his body can't absorb that much. Still, this is the only thing here that's similar to the comic because his sister was actually a college kid herself, working as an office assistant to pay for college. And she didn't have a kid. Gretchen is not in the comic at all. She was made for the show to add more fuel to the fire, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's why she was at that building that day in the comic. She was just working. This is their apartment building, and they were going to celebrate her 10th birthday. He also wasn't even there in the comic. He heard about it after the fact and was so heartbroken from the grief that he painted Mark out to be the bad guy. They also never found his sister's body, but here he did find their body. Found them right in the hands of Invincible. So without any context to go off of, him believing Mark is the bad guy actually makes sense here, and that's what they were going for. The show kind of reframes his perspective in a way that's grounded in trauma to what he saw, instead of just assuming everything like he did in the comic. Anyways though, after that, everything besides the fight is brand new to the show. The first time we see him in the comic, it's only after he took the biocapacitors from the government. While in the show, it shows us a gradual line of thinking that ultimately led him to becoming Powerplex. He tries the legal way first, right? Let's sue the dude. But the public supports Mark, which, by the way, I also really like how they're giving us other people's perspectives too. The comic doesn't do that. Scott tries to find proof using security feeds, but nothing comes up. We get glimpses of the government prepping for an upcoming Viltrumite attack, testing new power suits, laser weapons, and those biotherm discs. And also here, they were originally made to trap body heat in cold conditions, not for combat. But Scott alters them to work with his powers. And what they do is that they regulate and store his energy, helping him safely absorb more than his body could normally handle. So they basically let him safely use his powers without burning out, so he doesn't overload or kill himself. But he didn't alter them here like in the comic, they just came out the box like that. We then cut to him talking to these other government officials about how they feel about Invincible, and it's still cool to see like fans and like skeptics and, you know, haters or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, we really forget how complex this stuff is. And afterwards, we cut to Mark and Eve training Oliver. He fights Elephant here by himself. Never happened. They never fight in the comic. Amber is more involved with Oliver's growth here too, and this moment is when they teach Oliver about restraint and responsibility. They also talk about which version of Nolan is real, the loving father or the ruthless Viltrumite. Scott practices his lines with his wife, and I'll be honest, when I saw this, I could have sworn they were trying to make her look like Aaron Paul's girl from Breaking Bad. But no, she really does look like this in the comic. The show does go into more detail about his plans though. They show this map of Invincible sightings, which is new. She puts on the capacitors here, and we see a lot of sadness early on. He displays this emotion a lot compared to the comic. Paul joins Eve and Mark's family dinner, and he feels inferior, you know, unsure about his place in the family. They go way more in depth about Paul than they do in the comic. Mark and William go on a double date.
Yes! I know it's not Thanksgiving, but this guy just brought the turkey!
Ouch.
And then Amber shows up with her boyfriend. In the comic, Amber does show up around this time too, but it's because her boyfriend is abusive towards her. While here, he's a chill dude. Mark sees Powerplex on screen, but doesn't pursue him right away, which is a good change because he just didn't show up in the comic. Smith arrives, and unlike here when Powerplex just leaves, the show actually lets the full fight play out. He goes back home, and this is one-to-one for the most part. He tells his wife that he's screwed because the GDA knows someone stole the discs, and they will find out it's him. His son is also younger here than in the comic. This memorial scene is new and it's pretty impactful. The show balances both sides. You know, we see how Scott's justified in his pain, but people like Eve just think he's insane. Mark gets it though. The show lets us feel his regret a lot more than they do in the comic. And it hits on another theme, you know, the weight of being a hero. Something that we see Superman more than any other hero goes through, or at least any hero I've seen, maybe other than Spider-Man. In the show, he straight up gets arrested but escapes, but in the comic, he actually fights the Guardians around this time and wins. Robot develops Monster Girl's aging belt, and that's one-to-one. But then right after that in the comic, Mark finds another hidden camera. so he comes there to have him analyze it, and pretty much interrupts their moment. But here, that's replaced with Rex and Shrinking Ray, her decision to quit, and them getting closer as a couple. Rex also talks about his backstory a little bit here, and that's pretty one-to-one with the comic too, with what he was saying, but he just expands on his feelings more about it. He said he was bought from the government, while here it was more of an exchange. Like, they took him, and in return, they got the life they always wanted, so they pretty much had another family in a big house, but had to give him up to do it. It's really sad in the comic actually, but still, in both mediums, no one knows why Rex was singled out. We then get back to Powerplex, and in a last-ditch effort, they try to draw out Invincible. They come up with this plan, but this time it's his wife's idea, while here it was all his. Donald meets up with Mark and tells him the truth about Powerplex's identity, and from here everything is just completely faithful to the comic, except for the lightning color. I forgot to say that earlier, but yeah, though, the execution was great. Like, the screams, you know, the confusion whenever he got spitted on, and it's just the heartbreak. It's all elevated. It's so good. And then towards the end, at least Mark gets to finish his sorrowful speech. You know what I mean? Scott didn't even let him finish in the comic. He cut him off. And then in both mediums, he said,
Sooner or later, I'll find my way free. And then I will find you.
Finally, we see Angstrom gearing up to start the infamous Invincible War. And he just says,
This will do.
Here, while in the comic, he says it's a start. And you know, this is just a small change. I'm just excited. Like, we're finally here. The Invincible War. This is directly from issues 60 and 61. And this thing was a huge crossover event that bring everyone from Image Comics into this fight. So all the spin-off characters, this Batman knockoff, which I'll talk about more in that video, and even freaking Spawn. Imagine seeing Spawn in the show. That would be so cool, but you know, he's not here. But anyways, it still starts the same way. We saw what Angstrom did after the events of the season 2 finale. It's all one-to-one so far, literally. Like, they add some dialogue on how bad he feels about Powerplex, and then he gets a call on the Invincible. This is his first call on it. While in the show, his first call was when Mr. Liu came around. He also didn't think the call was gonna be this serious, but boy was he wrong. The show does this part pretty well. All of the other versions of Mark just start flooding in, and it's crazy. It's the same in the comic, but let's get started with the differences. The guy he's fighting here is different. And they cut out the part where Scar Mark, which by the way, I'm just gonna make up names, don't kill me. But yeah, they did cut out the part where Scar Mark says he wants to kill his own father. And also he says this line,
I've killed you before, and I'll kill you again.
To Spawn in the comic, while here it's to Wolfman. Now, I don't understand why they just didn't bring in Spawn, since they're in the same comic company. If anybody knows, let me know. Anyways, though, Sinister Mark fights Duncan Rosenblatt, the king of monsters in the comic, who's also from that one Cartoon Network movie from back in the day. And they instead brought another hero who is pretty cool, but he barely shows up in the comic. Tech Knight is actually fighting Mustache Mark here instead of Long Hair Mark like in the comic. Then it shows Shrinking Ray moving out, and of course that's new. Everything about her is new. Then our Mark gets to Stronghold Prison and he finds Mohawk Mark destroying everything. Like, their shades of blue and black are different, while in the comic they have the exact same color hues. Mark tries to get answers out of Mohawk, but he does not crack. He beats him, and 3 heroes instead of 4 come to stop our Mark, mistaking him for an evil variant. And Bolt finally makes his debut in the show. He's been around since the Guardians of the Globe's funeral. Powerplex escapes and thinks people are realizing how terrible Invincible is, but to his surprise, it's actually another Mark. Then he just gets one punched and is down for the count, while here he escapes and takes down a hero that was trying to stop him from escaping. Oliver goes out to fight, which is the same in the comic. They just added this scene. And then we get to the Pentagon, with them defeating another version of him, but it took everything in their disposal to do so. But he uses the sonic earpiece thing here, but in the comic, Britt is the one who shows up and saves them alongside my boy Donald. They end this scene with Cecil making some calls to every single hero in the world. They also talk about how this Mark isn't as strong as ours, which gives them hope on winning. We finally meet Britt for the very first time, and he looks pretty freaking tough, bro. He leads this team while in the comic it's being led by some archer. And a few of these characters are people we've seen in the Guardians tryouts in season 1, but literally none of them are in this part in the comic at all, so it looks like they're all brand new. Kid Omni-Man is saving people and he comes across a different version of Mark than in the comic. This one actually fights Savage Dragon, who is yet to make a debut. Their fight is longer, while here it's just a panel and that's it. Facetile Mark fights random heroes here, but in the comic, he's being beaten by the Cyber Force, a superhero team from Image Comics that came out before Invincible. The Mummy showing up is of course new, and she's very hurt for some reason, and I forgot why, to be honest. I don't know if they showed why or not, so I'm guessing we'll see more about that in season 4. I have no idea. Sinister Mark fights Oliver too in the comic, while here he fights this guy. I don't even know who he is, sadly, but he also says he murdered his own father. Then all these Marks are just fighting completely different people than in the comic. Like this one's fighting the guy from the Guardians tryouts. These two, who are just like these characters from Mortal Kombat, are fighting Shoulder Mark, and the kid just dies, bro, but this is new. The long-haired one fights these guys instead of Tech Knight. Eve and our Invincible jump Facetile Mark, and then Omnivincible flies in. This is new because here we only see him dealing with the Batman knockoff. And I also love the Mortal Kombat sounds this dude is making. It's so cool. I really like this part. But the one thing that is the same is Amber gets messed up. Like both her legs were destroyed. Mark grabs her and flies away. No Goggle Mark is whooping the Guardians of the Globe, and he's also way more playful here than in the comic. Here he just calls them pathetic like literally every other version does, and just chops Immortal's head clean off in the beginning of the fight. Like he's out of there, but in the show he's hanging on because this is personal. It's like Omni-Man all over again, especially since it's happening at the Guardians HQ and Darkwing is here. And we also see the same fatality he did in the comic with Immortal and Kate. Then Darkwing takes him to the Shadowverse. This moment with William and Rick is new, and another Mark is looking to kill Debbie because he did it before, which we also see in the show. Then we cut to Forehead Mark, and he's just laying waste to the Teen Team's biz. This also happens in the comic, but of course the show just elaborates on it more. Bulletproof saves Robot, and he says we gotta go, but Rex says no, get them out of here. The comic makes it obvious that he's trying to sacrifice himself, while here Rex kind of tricks them into leaving. He holds out longer than he does in the comic, but it ultimately ends up the same. Wolfman makes another appearance, and pretty much every single person they show during the aftermath is different from the comic. This is the same though, except for when Mark chooses to stay even when Cecil said his mom and his brother are still out there. And it also shows Oliver winning, but it's against another Mark. And we also see Powerplex and Tech Knight flying back to Earth, and he makes it just in time for day 3. They introduce the final 8 strongest versions of Invincibles, the same way it does in the comic. The only difference is that the show switched out this version and replaced him with Omnivincible, which I think is a good change because he has a lot of potential. He looks pretty cool, and he's actually dead in the comic right now. He didn't make it to day 3, so I'm glad he's here. They meet at Mark's parents' house, and Omnivincible says,
I hate coming back to this place.
While Sinister Mark is the one that says that here. The others though have the same dialogue more or less, except Sinister Mark leads the charge to go against Angstrom in the comic, while here everyone seems to agree with him, except for Mohawk and Full Body Mark initially. Still, they do get on the same page, and they all try to gang up on Angstrom until they're all sent to the same wasteland that Mark was stranded in. The comic kinda alludes to them coming back, but the show does not. Cecil tells our Mark they found Angstrom, and he teleports there, and this is new. While here, he just flies in with both Oliver and Bulletproof, which is honestly pretty cool, because if y'all didn't know, Bulletproof was Mark's original hero name during the creation of this comic. But yeah, of course the fight is a little different in the comic. Oliver and Bulletproof are getting pummeled by these battle spheres, but Mark is maneuvering and tanking them in both mediums. Their fight is also longer in the show, thankfully. Angstrom also has way more battle spheres in the show than he does in the comic. The show adds him saying that if he gets into a portal, he will kill everyone he loves and will come back for him. And that's when Mark uses his willpower to beat the odds and finally get his hands on Angstrom. Oliver comes out of nowhere saying, "Kill him!" just like he does here, but he gets away. The comic has them exchange some dialogue though on the other side of the portal. Then he tries to go back, but the scientists don't give him a second chance. And now day 4 is upon us. And in both mediums, we see the remnants of the Invincible War. The newscaster talking about it all asks, why did this all happen? And why did all the attackers resemble Invincible? Kind of painting him out to be this bad guy, with the only person speaking up for Mark is Savage Dragon. But they cut all of this out in the show. Mark is talking to Eve about how he should have killed Angstrom the first time, and Cecil agrees. And this is actually new, but it hits home about one of the core themes this season. You know, responsibility, choosing who lives or dies. Mark helps with the cleanup, and Powerplex is there. He's helping too. People thought he was just a random hero until he attacks Mark. But Oliver and Mark is the ones that stop him, while here everyone else does. And he gets pinned down by what looks like a Clayface knockoff from Batman. Britt takes him away, but he does plant that seed of doubt in everyone's mind. Mark is in the hospital and he's sorrowful. Eve's parents come in and it's literally 1-to-1 right here, like the mom is practically reading from the comic here. Immortal comes back and Kate's there to greet him, but she has longer hair here. And then Immortal quits the team because he wants to start a family. Cecil meets with the heroes and asks Mark to lead the Guardians because they know that some enemy will come around while they're still rebuilding. But Mark refuses in both mediums and wants to help with the cleanup instead. Mark is particularly more emotional in the show, but still manages to say thank you to Cecil at the end, while in the comic he handles himself pretty well. But despite that, Britt still calls him a moody little cuss in the comic, which I don't even know what that means. Mark helps with the cleanup, and that's when Conquest comes in. And he looks so rugged and imposing in the comic when he first arrives, completely covering the sun. And in both mediums, it ends with Mark needing something to hit. And that's when we finally get to the season finale. This is the 3-part series dubbed Conquest, which takes place right after the Invincible War, and it's crazy because it's almost 1-to-1 with the comic, like barely anything changes. Episode 8 starts with Conquest Part 2. Conquest headbutts Mark and pins him down, while in the comic he just tackles him. Honestly, all you see is just tackling and destruction in both mediums and pretty similar dialogue. All we know is that Conquest is a monster. Their fight takes them to space, and in the comic, Conquest is enjoying himself, but here he is way more expressive about it. And I don't even know how he does this in space, but this is also something he doesn't do in the comic. Oliver goes to help in both mediums, but she actually has Debbie's blessing here, while in the comic she does not want him to go. Mark coughs up blood here, and that's a slight change, and it's really here to show just how outclassed he is when first meeting a person like Conquest. Oliver does try to catch up though, but they're way too fast. Mark gets pummeled even more, and then that's when he finally catches up and Conquest instantly grabs him in the comic. In the show though, he straight up mollywops him and then catches him. Mark gets Oliver to safety and then regains the upper hand after Conquest provokes him. Conquest, by the way, is more or less the same ruthless killer here. Arguably way worse than Nolan because he willingly disobeys Viltrumite orders just to get a real fight. He's literally trying to draw Mark's full strength for the fun of it and will kill anybody in order to get it, which is the complete opposite of Nolan and everybody else's reasoning for doing anything in the Empire. Meanwhile, back at the Pentagon, Cecil is pissed. In the comic, he has a broken arm from the Invincible War, which I forgot to count that earlier, so I'm gonna do it now. But here it's healed. Either way it goes, nothing is going right. D. Sinclair's ace in the hole isn't ready yet, so there is no way to help Mark against the strongest Viltrumite we've ever seen. In the show, Cecil's just angry, but in the comic, he is spooked. Now we're at Conquest Part 3. And in the show, the newscaster reports on Mark fighting a new Viltrumite. In the comic, people finally realize that Invincible is actually invincible, and for some wild reason, after analyzing this footage, they think that this is Omni-Man, which whoever analyzed this needs to get fired. Eve wakes up and realizes Mark needs help. Then her parents figure out he's invincible and she rushes off. That's the same in both mediums. Conquest says his father is dead in both versions, which we know isn't true, but there's no way Mark knows this. Oliver then comes back and they extended this part in the show. He punches Oliver and catches him again. Conquest grabs Oliver and just starts trying to tear him apart, bro. And it's so sad, it's crazy, honestly. You see the agony. Mark stops him and then Cecil picks up Oliver. Then Eve talks to Cecil about helping. Her Her clothes are different than in the comic, but the bigger difference is the explanation. Cecil says they're moving so fast that a portal can't even catch them, so there's no point in trying. While here, he says this Viltrumite might even be stronger than Nolan. And since you're injured, there's no way I'm bringing you out there. Like, you're just gonna get yourself killed. But Eve pretty much forces him to bring her anyways. Now they're out to sea, and in the comic, Mark's dragged through boats and terrain, while in the show, Conquest takes a page from Nolan's book and drags him through people on the beach into towns, destroying whole streets. And then Adam Eve arrives. In the comic, she's like, oh wait, you're not Omni-Man, what the heck is the news talking about? While in the show, she just calls him an animal. After that though, she just powers up here and starts gaining the upper hand, using all kinds of powers and everything that's in her disposal, which this didn't happen in the comic, because as soon as she pulled up, Conquest just instantly screwed her up. But the crazy thing is, their fight literally lasted 60 seconds. Just like comic Cecil predicted, because there, if he did send another hero, they would literally only last for like a minute. Eventually though, the show does catch up and Eve effectively dies. But before he dies, Mark cries out to Cecil in the show, but he does not do that in the comic. And then we finally get to the conclusion of Conquest. Mark sees Eve reviving, and Conquest takes that to his advantage, but the show adds this dialogue. They add Conquest's loneliness, how everyone thinks he's unstable. That's why he's sent from planet to planet, because they don't understand his greatness. He essentially trauma dumps on Mark because he's about to kill him once and for all, until Eve saves him and burns his skin clean off. And it basically follows the comic from here on. They completely murder Conquest, and they both collapse on the ground, but when the other heroes arrive, there's more of them here in the comic than there is in the show, and Monster Girl covers up Robot's eyes, since Eve is naked. In the next issue, Eve is in the hospital with Mark. She explains that she didn't actually die. The mental block that was on her powers just broke because she was at her breaking point, and she was able to rebuild herself. In the comic though, when she comes back, she makes her breasts bigger. Then they lay together here, but in the comic, it's hinted that they do something else. Debbie and Paul catch them kissing in the comic, while here they're just relaxing, and Debbie blames herself at Mark's condition and tells him to quit being a hero here. They both say no, and Debbie snaps at Eve and then leaves with Paul. This was all cut in the show, but I really wish they didn't. That was some good drama low-key. Cecil comes in and Mark instantly forces him to show him where Conquest's body is. He tells him to burn it in the show, while here, he just says he's glad he's dead. They have Rex's funeral afterwards. There are different heroes present compared to the comic, but other than that, it's pretty faithful. Afterward, Mark and Eve go home. Eve takes off his clothes, and we notice that there's something going on with Eve's powers. In the comic though, there's a flower blooming here. The finale ends with us learning that the Sequids were living in the sewers this whole time, which is actually different because they do show this in the comic too, but they also show the Sequids way earlier, like in the Invincible War and things like that. But here they just cut that all. Also, Battle Beast being saved is new, and this could have something to do with the new Battle Beast spin-off adaptation, since he's going into the same circumstances he's in issue 1 of that comic. And Cecil actually constructs a whole fake body just to deceive Mark. Another thing the show cuts. Then Oliver ends up talking to Mark about him getting out tomorrow and to help Mark with cleanup. And Mark is distant because all he can think about is how Eve's powers have been acting up. They talked about this in the comic, but this was cut in the show. But there is one thing that stays the same.
You were right. You were right about the Maulers. You were right about Angstrom. They hurt so many people, ruined so many lives. Angstrom almost killed you and Mom even. So if anyone else ever puts my family or anyone I love at risk, I won't hesitate to kill them.
And it ends with Damien freaking Darkblood, what the heck, coming out of nowhere, summons the supposed Demon King and promises the body of a powerful surface dweller so he can either A, take over, like via mind control or something, or B, possess it. I'm pretty sure they're talking about Nolan though, because if it's not Nolan, then it's most likely Invincible. because unless he has some kind of crystal ball down there or something, he should have no idea what's happening on the surface, which means he has no idea how strong Mark is. So he probably still thinks Omni-Man is on Earth and he's still the most powerful. Still though, I have no idea. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Like it could be Invincible, Omni-Man, even Conquest. But now I understand why everyone hated Damien so much. I thought he was just getting flack for no reason, you know? But no, he's working with the whole Demon King and trying to take over the Earth? That's crazy. But yeah, that's it. That is officially most of the changes for season 3. Now there is way more changes than this, but y'all know I'll be here all year trying to count every single change. We are officially 65 issues down out of 144 issues. So y'all, let me know how many seasons y'all think is left in the series and what y'all thought about the changes in general. But yeah, you know, more Invincible videos on the way. Let me know what y'all want to see down below too, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.